It's not going. Oh, there we go. Hey, everybody. Today is Friday. It is Friday with Fran. I appreciate you joining us today. Fran and I just get together every Friday and we talk about some things related to special education. Sometimes we go off on tangents and they end up being things that don't necessarily 100% only pertain to special education, but that's how life is. There's a lot of things that we think we need to zoom in on as far as this only applies to someone with special needs. But in reality, most everything I think that we have talked about could apply to anybody, whatever their unique abilities are, whether those unique abilities are that you're normal or or that, there's something else about you. So today we are going to talk about communication and three different kind of areas that I think that we're going to discuss. Hopefully we'll get them all in and we won't get off on one of them and not talk about the other two. But hey, if that happens, that happens. So we're going to talk about ways to communicate with educators, ways that we can communicate with each other. I've already messed it up. What did I say? I just typed this up like a half an hour ago and I've already forgotten.
Communicate with education staff, ways we all use to communicate, and how important communication is in all situations.
Yeah, see how important communication is. Fran has a great ability at her setup that she has another monitor that she can look at. And my setup is my kitchen table, so I don't have that same option. Had been using my phone for a while as my sort of second device, but I've dropped it, and the holder that I have for it has spit it out literally a couple of times, like during a broadcast recently. And so I've just decided to let it rest, and knowing, because Fran and I have communicated, get that in there, that her setup is different so that she has that option and I don't. So thank you, Fran, for being with me on Fridays with Fran, because it wouldn't be the same without you, for multiple reasons, least of which is, it is about Friday with Fran. So Fran, tell me, because communication, Fran's usually the idea person. She always seems to have the idea of what we should talk about next. So when she brought this to me, I was like, okay, that's only going to take us like 2 seconds to talk about. And she goes, no, here's what I was thinking. So tell me some of the things that you were thinking about when you said, let's talk about communication.
Well, originally I was thinking of how we communicate with our loved ones' education team, and how we facilitate that communication, especially if we have, if our child cannot communicate things accurately, or is, I hate this term, but it's used, nonverbal. Mm-hmm. Because when people think of nonverbal, and this falls under communication, so it's a slight tangent, but just bear with me for just a second.
No, this is actually something that we need to touch on.
Think of nonverbal, they think they don't communicate.
Right. At all. But they have no verbal ability at all.
Right.
And that's true.
That maybe it should be non-word. I don't know. But it's like people communicate, and I have discovered this too. People communicate with so much more. And now that we've become this like mass society, I struggle with communication because I'm looking at people's lips. I didn't realize I look at people's lips a lot. I look for people's facial expressions. And when you can only see from like the bridge of your nose and the eyeballs, mm-hmm. you're missing a lot of communication. And I find myself going, huh? What? And I'm sure people are like, okay, really? Yeah. I spoke that pretty clearly. You know, what is that? That on the telephone, was it Snoopy or Charlie Brown? You would always hear
Charlie Brown's teacher. Yeah, Charlie Brown's teacher in the background. Yeah.
Well, that's how I feel communication is these days. So yes, that was a tangent, but it falls under communication.
It does, absolutely.
So okay, but back to hi Alex.
Hi Alex.
Back to the edge. Okay, so part of my original thought process, as you were saying, was how do we communicate? Because my son, in the beginning especially, he wasn't communicating well at all. And also, if I had a need, there was no way I could pass it on through Luke. It would never get
Right.
there. So how did I do that? So that was my original thought. But as I was sitting here thinking, before we went live or before you came on, I was like, even our communication, yours and mine, how it's grown and changed as we've done Friday with Fran, and just that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So yeah.
So I want to touch on the nonverbal, because when I started teaching in one of the districts, they assigned me students that they told me were nonverbal. Not all of my students, but they assigned me a cluster of kids. And I had the same thought process of, okay, they can't speak. I didn't have the thought process that they couldn't communicate, like with words or with sign language, or, with their eye expressions or whatever. But I had the thought process that they could say 0 words. And it didn't take me long to realize that was the wrong definition. And then I was getting frustrated with other people in the building who kept saying that my students were nonverbal. And I'm like, no, they're not. They can say words. So I've never looked up the official definition of nonverbal, but I was told nonverbal means in the sense that they cannot hold a conversation with another person using their words. So in that regard, I can understand, if that is the actual definition. Are you looking it up? That's okay. That's fine. That's why you have the setup that you have. With that definition, I could understand why they were saying that some of my students were nonverbal, because if I didn't have the context, I couldn't always make out the words that my students were trying to verbalize. I have a niece right now who has difficulty with several of her sounds. I wouldn't consider her nonverbal because she does speak a lot, but we were with her this past weekend, and there are certain letters that she replaces because she can't say certain ones. So she replaces it with something else, and it makes it sound like real words, but it doesn't make sense in the context of what she's explaining to us. Right. So in that regard, again, I needed the context to have a better understanding of what she was saying. And it's trying to there wasn't anything for her to point to, because a lot of what she was talking about were things that weren't happening right at the time. And so trying to figure out the context. And finally, I just was like, okay, I have to message her. We had her for the weekend. Her mom was elsewhere. So I had to message her mom. And I'm like, yeah, I don't understand what she's telling me. What does this mean? And what is this like? I know that this is what we're talking about, but I am not getting, I just can't figure it out. And so even though her mom communicates and carries on a conversation with her, she isn't able to do that with everybody yet. So to a sense, she's would have been considered nonverbal, I guess. So did you find the definition?
Yeah, I actually shared a screen. Can you see that?
Oh, I can. Yeah, sorry. I was zoning out as to where that would be. Sorry.
It's okay.
Not involving or using words being other than verbal.
And this is C is what so many people think of when they think of
lacking
verbal.
Or appearing to lack the ability to engage in speech. Yeah. So so you got that out of Webster's dictionary.
So that's Merriam-Webster. You want to stop, share, or stop?
I'm curious what the ASHA definition would be, which is the American Speech and Hearing Association. So they're the ones who actually, you get the speech eligibility from in your school districts.
So you
but some
educational definition.
Yeah. No, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but that's just who I dealt with the most. Something that you talked about when you were talking about us with our masks on now is I wonder how many audiologists have had their business increase since we've all had to start wearing masks, and people have realized, I don't hear as well as I thought I did. I did do a lot of lip reading before. And, so I'm wondering how many people have ended up making hearing appointments.
Oh, that is true.
All right. So is this the ASHA definition that you have now?
I haven't gotten there yet.
No. Okay. I saw a post a while back on Facebook that said, what was it? It's something like, I don't hear as well when you're wearing your mask. It's like, that really, is true, but it really isn't your hearing because you were reading lips before. So it was something along that lines. I probably didn't say it exactly right.
I'm not able to find it, so I'm going to stop for now.
All right, no problem.
Because otherwise I'm going to be really distracted. I apologize. but okay, so but to tag off of what you're saying, how many of us when we're driving, we need to find directions, or we're looking for somewhere and we're looking for street signs, so we turn the radio down.
Right.
How is that going to help us see something? But it's when we are communicating, we're using all of our senses. We're using everything, and we don't realize that. And a lot of times miscommunication. Yeah, Rachel, you turn it down too when you're looking for the signs, huh? A lot of times miscommunication occurs because our words are saying one thing, but our entire body language is saying something else.
Yeah. At one time, I knew the percentage definitively. I think it's 93% of our communication is nonverbal, meaning our tone, our facial expressions, our body language, and only 7% are the actual words that we're speaking. And I've been in workshops where, and they're usually workshops geared to helping us understand that and helping us to de-escalate some behavioral situations, because depending, like they give a sentence and they give the same sentence to 5 different people, and each person has to emphasize a different word in the sentence. And then one person says the sentence with no emphasis on any of the words. And it is truly amazing how emphasis on different words changes not the meaning of it, but the sense of what you mean. So if you've never done anything like that, just try to do that as a little exercise. Get, your family members together, or have, like I said, 5 or 6 people, and simple sentence. If you, when it was just the words in the sentence and there was no extra inflection on any of the words, a very mild sentence. But depending on what word was emphasized, it'd be like, what did you do today? Pretty innocuous sentence versus, what did you do today? Or what did you do today? So, just changing inflection on just a couple of different words changes the whole tone.
And not only, as you did that, though, not only did you communicate it with inflection in your words, your facial features, even your posture
changes.
Yeah. Not
So,
that either of us are trying to say we are speech pathologists
oh my
or
gosh, no,
communication people.
no, 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 no.
It's just even from our point of view of as in it through life.
Right. Yeah. Both of us
So,
are lifelong learners, I think, in that we're always absorbing stuff around us, whether it's directly what we're supposed to be learning at that moment.
yeah.
But yeah, that's
And
a good
so,
point. We're not lawyers. We're not speech pathologists. We're not therapists of any licensed form. We're just friends who have. Fran has experience with special education because she raised two children who are now adults, and they both have different special needs. And she herself now has some special needs. I am a former special education teacher, so we've both got over 20 years experience within special education. I don't like to claim that I'm an expert. I know people tell me that I should because of, I would say in some areas I would count myself an expert because I've done it long enough. But speech is not one of those areas. It's just things that when I worked with speech pathologists, I learned from them and different classes that I've taken, just different stuff that I've learned.
and also hearing impaired educators that, they have so much to add to the communication aspect of it. That's where I've learned a lot of things as well.
Yeah. Now, did you learn sign language at one time? Were you proficient with sign language?
No, I learned, like when I sing praise music, sometimes I will sign words, but could I communicate? Because that is a true different language. No,
absolutely.
I can speak to you in German, but not in sign language.
Yeah.
So,
and in my student teaching class, I had, excuse me, I had a student who was hard of hearing. And then one of the teacher's aides that worked with us had a brother who was hard of hearing. And so with her brother, she had learned sign language for him. And with our hearing impaired student, we weren't teaching, his family didn't want him to learn sign language because they felt like he had enough hearing that, they really wanted him to focus on that. But during my student teaching time, I did learn some different parts of sign language. And I still today can do most of the letters in sign language, but as far as like real words outside of just individual letters, I'm not very good at. I was able to, when I finished my student teaching, my birthday happened to be at the same time that student teaching ended. And so they had taken all the little sign language pictures for the song Happy Birthday and cut them all out and put them in a card and then asked me to read it. They wanted to see how well I had learned my sign language.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So that's, again, that's another way to communicate. So knowing that there are lots of different ways to communicate, and each person's way is unique, even if that person doesn't have unique abilities.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then we also have preferred ways to communicate. So when you're communicating with your loved one's educator or nursing care or job coach or whatever situation you might find yourself in, what are some ways that you have used or would have wanted to use?
I think we've used quite the gamut. In the beginning, we used a notebook, a Comlog. Luke would pick it out. We'd go shopping down the school aisle, and he'd find a fun color. Yes, I would pull some with different covers, and he would pick which one, and that would be his. And I think eventually he learned to give it to them. I'm not positive, or they might have just taken it. The goal was, that was one of the things, was give them your note. That way they would read it, and it would give him some power and to empower him to do rather than just for them to dig it out of his bag.
Right.
And sometimes it was hard. I understand that it's hard for them to write things down all the time, or the timing wise. Sometimes they get forgotten. But eventually, if we get in a routine, they would just jot a little something down for the day, or if there was a concern. And then if I knew there was something going on, if he had a med change, he didn't sleep well, whatever, I would try to communicate that as well. So they would be prepared if he was having an off day. They would understand Luke didn't sleep all night. So therefore, this is why he is the way he is. Or if he's
Right.
tired, please let him take a nap rather than sitting there telling me he has to stay awake when
Right.
you and I would not be expected. So that was what we used at some points. With technology today, you can email your teachers. And I know there's all these new things too, and I'm not even familiar. I've heard the names that you can use, that teachers are using to communicate even prior to COVID. They were to communicate with classes, and that parents could directly message their teachers. Good old fashioned phone, leave a message on their classroom voicemail line. Can you call me back when you want? Sometimes you even, some of the teachers, due to the nature of what my kids were doing, a lot of my kids' teachers, we became friends outside as well. And, we might have each other's phone numbers, but it was a matter of you didn't cross. There's a line you don't cross as well. And that's important. If you do have a loved one's educate, you don't sit there and bother them, but we had that trust and we understood that. And I think that's why we were able to do that. And I don't think that's one thing, it's not, I don't think we should expect a teacher to give us their private phone number. It's a blessing when it happens, but it's not something you should expect or demand. But so sometimes you might just send a quick text that way.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's been email a lot recently with Allison. And that's the best way. And also, it also helps because then if I forgot what I communicated, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I forgot what they communicated back to me, it's there, and then I'm not bothering them, or they're not, or I can go, oh, they didn't answer that, so I really do need to pursue further. Hey, this is what I really needed to know. Can you please get back to me in some form?
Yeah. Speaking of the giving your families, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my voice today. Giving your families your cell phone number. I had families who didn't have email. And so trying to communicate with them, like you said, sending a note home, or there were some things that they maybe had email, but they had their phone on them. And, this was before you could always get email like we can now with the smartphones. Before it, you couldn't send an email and necessarily pick it up on your phone. Mm-hmm. So I did text several of my students' parents because there would be things that, while they weren't emergencies, I needed an answer sooner than if I was going to send a note home. Okay. But I also I had some families who were military. So I couldn't always email, but I could text. Or I had the other way around. I could email, but I couldn't text. So for me, and I think probably most teachers, it's important that we find out what is going to work best for both the teacher and the parent. And, like I said, it was just, I always would ask at the beginning of the school year, I'd have a form, like, give me all your contact information and then tell me which way you prefer to be contacted. And like your kids, I spent many years with a lot of my students and their families. So we did become close over the years. But even some of my first time families, I'm like, you know what? It's fine. I'd rather, and most families didn't reach out to me unless it was a very serious issue outside of school hours. I did have a few families that sometimes they felt that their children would listen better to me than they would to the parent. And so if they were having a rough time with them in the mornings, getting them ready for school, I gave them permission to call me, and I would talk to my student, and then they would do whatever it was, get dressed or eat your breakfast or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I thought that parents felt they didn't have any other body that would
Recourse.
listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or that understood their situation. And not that I understood it completely, but I had an understanding. And so for that reason, I would also, if you need to talk, even if it's on the weekends and, your child is just driving you crazy and they're just not listening, because I had some that had some severe behaviors, I would tell them to call me. And if I was available to answer the phone, I would. Sometimes I didn't, but for the most part, I tried to answer and I tried to help out. But I would not expect that of my colleagues. It would have to be that, like you said, it's their comfort.
It's a personal choice.
Right.
It's then sorry, the dog is slipping off of my.
Oh no, that's okay. I have to keep shifting in my chair. My back's hurting today. I'm just falling apart today.
Totally get it.
But I want to caution parents now, during the remote learning or virtual learning, whatever you want to call it, that your loved ones' teachers, you should not expect them to be available to you 24/7. And I am hearing from teachers and I'm hearing from students, and I'm getting it in parent conversations too, that that's what's being expected of them. So parents are, and I understand from the parent and the student's perspective, and I also understand from the teacher's perspective. The parents and the students a lot of times are, working or doing whatever during the school day, and then they might have questions in the evening or on the weekends. Well, they've been interacting virtually with their teacher from 8 to 3 or whatever their school hours are, and getting that immediate feedback. And then they feel like, well, I should still be able to get that immediate feedback if I email them at 11 o'clock at night, or I had a nephew who's in high school, and he just posted that he was upset with his teacher because she was not guaranteeing a response to an email after 4:30 in the afternoon. And he was like, that's so bogus. And I said, well, she has a life too. And if you were in school in person, you wouldn't expect a guaranteed response. It's not that she won't respond if she can. She's just not guaranteeing you. So from, 7 to 4:30, she's guaranteeing you'll get a response right away. That's plenty of her life to give you a response. Oh yeah, I guess. Okay. So my poor daughter and my poor nieces and nephews cannot complain about their teachers to me, because I almost always take the teacher's side.
Yeah, that's kind of my kids have learned that as well.
Yeah. So that's, as far as communicating with your loved one's caregiver, whether that's a teacher, a nurse, job coach, or whatever, I think that's the main takeaway, is to find what works best for the two of you. Would you agree, or am I missing something?
Yes. No, okay. No, I think it's important that, and especially to communicate. And if you're finding it's not working, to be able to communicate that, hey, this way we've chosen, is there a way we can modify it? Is there another way? Because right now my schedule's changed or something, and I can't, I don't have access to this or whatever. And I think it comes back, we talked about it the other day, grace, giving each other grace.
Yep, I was just thinking that.
And I think in communication in general, having that kind of grace for each other, where we're like, okay, well, maybe they didn't mean that. Trying to take a step back out of the situation, and instead of running and posting it on social media, complaining to your child if it's about the teacher, or as a teacher complaining to your coworkers, instead of communicating with the parent, sit there and step back and go, okay, what were they really meaning? Did I miss it? Did I leave a word out? Much like you were talking about with how even that one sentence and what word was emphasized. Just taking a step back and reevaluating what was said and going, and then maybe asking, if you can't get a hold of the person with whom you are communicating, speaking with someone, not someone's,
Right.
and say, hey, okay, this is what was written. Can you help me figure this one out? Am I reading too far into it? Can you give me a different perspective? But I really don't want it to go any further. This is just, I just want to be able to communicate clearly. And is it me, or is this what it says?
Right. That's an excellent point. Especially when it's just text and it's not a voice, because we as individuals tend to put in our own feelings at the moment we're reading it. So if we are you telling me you're stressed out again?
No, it's my favorite. It's become my favorite mug. I need to get a new one though, because I don't want everyone to think I'm stressed out all the time, because I'm not.
But yeah,
but it's a nice size.
Even, and again, this goes to communicating with anyone, whether it's a coworker, a loved one's caregivers, your children, your spouse, your neighbor, whatever. If it's strictly text back and forth, be that, an email or texting on a phone or whatever, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever all the things are that people use to communicate with only words. If you're in a bad mood, you could most definitely read something negative into the words, but the person sending those words didn't have that intention when they sent the words. Or I have written some things here recently, and I thought it was very clear what I was trying to say. But once I had somebody else look at it, they said, I don't know what you're talking about right here. Oh, okay. So thankfully I hadn't sent it to anybody before having that person read it for me. So yeah, especially with very important things, you want to, take a step back and maybe have somebody else read it. Or if you're very frustrated, and I know we have this rule for our sports teams in our local school, that if you get really mad at your child's coach, you cannot go talk to that coach for at least 24 hours. And sometimes we need that, because what we're so worked up about in the moment, once we have some time away from the situation and we've had some time to think about it, maybe we won't be so upset. And if we give ourselves and that other person that grace, we may prevent a lot of problems just thinking about it a little bit more. And then we're not saying things when we're in an irrational state, so that could be something as well to think about when you're communicating with your child's teacher, especially if you feel like your child's teacher isn't doing the things that are in your child's IEP. Think about it for 24 hours before you respond, or reach out to a friend or an IEP coach and and have that person look over it and just say,
I believe you and I had that conversation recently. That's why I'm laughing. I'm like, you did. You said, Fran, just give it a little bit. I'm like, what? Give it a bit. I'm like, okay. I'm gonna trust you on that, and I'm gonna give it a bit. Did more communication have to happen? Yes, but was it not fly off the handle communication? Yes. So I can attest that there are times we need someone to say, hey, just breathe for a bit. Breathe.
Yeah. Yep.
It kind of falls into some of those things about which we spoke on the other week when we spoke
Yeah.
of self-care. You kind of drop into that. Self-care is also giving yourself in communication. Ha, if you are not in a good place, you can't communicate well.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's very difficult to, think. I didn't really mean to give that example so literally, but sometimes it's difficult to think of the right words to say in the moment. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to escalate the situation if it's not necessary. Unfortunately, sometimes it is necessary. You do have to apply a little pressure, but being able to step back and think, is this person, and when it's our kids, and especially when it's kids with special needs, I know that it's a much more defensive state because you've had to fight so much, and you've had to defend your child so much, and you've had to stand up for your child so much, that anything that isn't going perfectly must just feel like an affront, even when it isn't intended that way. But taking a minute and thinking, okay, is that really what the teacher is saying? Can I ask somebody else? Even myself, even having taught special education for all the years that I did, I used to get very frustrated with some of my gen ed teachers because I felt like they weren't accepting of my students when they would be in their room. And it wasn't until after I left teaching that I realized how little education my gen ed peers received when they were getting their education degree that was related to special education students. And then I started to think, is this why some of them weren't as accepting? Were they fearful that they weren't going to be able to provide what the student needed? And so maybe without even their realization, they just didn't want that student there because that student might show flaws in that teacher that maybe they didn't know they had, or that they just didn't want exposed. I don't know if that's true, but
right.
it was a different perspective that came to me.
And as you're saying that, the word that keeps coming to is pride. And so often we let our pride in a lot of areas, but since we're speaking on communication specifically, our pride often comes in the way of communication. Because we don't want to appear that we're lacking in understanding. And so rather than ask for assistance in understanding that communication, we're just going to go with what we think it says, or disregard the communication because we don't understand it and just bully on through.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to know that it's okay to ask for help. When we're communicating, if we're struggling with communicating with our educators or even with our child, it's okay to ask somebody else, hey, and that's how I kind of see these your and my discussion, our Friday with Fran, is we're just sharing our perspective on it, and anyone listening can share in on how, those kind of things is, this is how I did it. Maybe it'll help you, or as you share, I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Let me try that the next time that occurs with kind of thing. Sorry, Cooper's kind of needy today, so.
No, that's okay. He looks so comfortable and cute. I don't know how comfortable you are, but he looks quite comfortable.
Yeah, next time I'll wear a sling. But You know the little baby swings that
Mhm.
that just go straight across? Yeah,
Yeah.
he actually prefers that and sleeps in one. So maybe
Oh,
next time I'll just have that on and he can sleep in
there
it.
you go.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but
But he's communicating. I mean, what he is doing right now is communicating, whether we're understanding what he's communicating exactly. I mean, to me, when I see him, he looks like he's communicating that he needed extra attention right now for whatever reason, and he needs to learn to relax, Alex says. um,
yeah, for sure, right.
but that you are his safe place. Being right up against you like that makes him feel safe and comfortable. So he doesn't have words. And I could be totally off on what he's communicating, but to me,
I
that's
thought you were going to say I was going to be totally off that he doesn't have words. I'm like, no, you're not. He does not talk. He's not Mr. Ed the talking horse. We're okay there.
Oh, darn. Okay. I thought maybe you had some secret there. But yeah. And
Right.
I will be the first to admit that I do that with my own dog all the time. And I also do it with people because I know that behaviors are communication. So I will often look at what my dog is doing, or what someone's behaviors are, even if they are using words, and try to match what makes sense to me
to make the whole communication
to get the
rather
whole
than the
communication.
words,
Yeah.
the verbal words in combination with the behavior is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right or wrong, I mean, I feel like I'm right more often than I'm wrong, but I also don't, my dog can't tell me what he's really doing or thinking.
Maybe Cooper and Jonas could have a discussion one day and we could allow them to share.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, or who is it? The dog whisperer dude? Maybe he could come on in.
Caesar something. Caesar Milan. Caesar.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Maybe he could tell us. But you know what I was thinking? Sorry, that was a sidetrack. But just I was thinking as you were sharing, and part of communication is attending to what the person is saying and not trying to think of the next thing. I really was, but what it brought to mind as you were communicating to me is sometimes when there is no communication, there is communication.
Right. But explain what you mean by that, because I have my opinion of what that means.
Okay. I know that for me personally, if I'm in a place where I'm just like I'm drawing inward, I turn off communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I literally shut down communication with people via all forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, because I have to self-care. But in doing that, I am communicating to others without I realize it now. In the past, I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
If I communicate with others on a daily basis and then I wasn't communicating, it caused them concern.
Right.
But I didn't understand that. I was like, well, I'm not sure why you're worried. I'm just taking care of me. I just can't I can't communicate in a positive fashion. So I didn't want to draw you down, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I just had stopped communication.
Right.
And but in doing that, now I understand. I was communicating. I was not in a good place.
Alex says she turns off to protect herself.
And I do, but I didn't realize when people were reaching out to me in those times of turnoff, they were communicating love,
right,
to me, and that they cared and they wanted to be there if I wanted them to be there. Right. If I was willing, they were going to be there. So so that is a form of communication as well. I just, because I was looking at that which you had written, and part of it was communication is in all situations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just our daily lives as we communicate. And you know what I've been doing? Okay.
But,
This is a real like, because we're off of this
well, we
shutting
do.
down right
That's
now.
what we do.
Okay. But it's still communication. I have determined that there is so much yuck in the world right now. And sometimes it's just where our attitude, where our mindset is,
Mm-hmm.
how we can handle the yuck.
Right.
And I wasn't handling the yuck very well at all. So I'm sure there are a lot of other people. Well, I shouldn't say I'm sure there are, but I wanted to make sure that the people I encountered in a day had something positive said to them. So I don't remember when I made a conscious decision to do this, but I've tried with every person I interact with on a daily basis to say something positive to them.
Yeah.
Not just how
good.
are you, but say, even if it's, I like the barrette in your hair, or there's, and these are, I'm talking about anybody I encounter, not just people I know, but like the
Mm-hmm.
person through the drive-through. You just sound so friendly today, or I needed to hear that, and it's amazing the smile you get back
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times. Or sometimes you don't get a smile, you'll get someone starts crying and you're like, oh crud, what did I do? Oh crud. What?
Yeah. But then
then they needed something else. And if I have time, I give, I would say, or I'll say, hey, do you need something? Or, but I've determined that communication in this time is so important, that we share a kindness, a love, a compassion for each other as a human being.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so for me, though, not just for the others then with whom I interact, also myself. It's changed me.
I think this whole pandemic has changed everyone.
Right. But it's changed when I care enough about the person with whom I'm looking, then I'm not self-absorbed. So if I'm in a bad place, I had to come up with a positive to say to that person. So it took it off of my negative, my wherever I am, and focus it on them for a second. And so then when I came back to me, sometimes that where I was isn't quite as dark or deep.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if it's somebody's saying. If it is, I don't know who to contribute it to, but that the best way to get out of your own funk is to help somebody else, which that's not the way it was exactly worded, but basically that, the best way to make yourself happy is to help others be happy. And that's it, just reaching out and trying to be positive. If you feel like you physically can't or financially can't do something to help somebody else, it's amazing how inspiring a phone call, a text message, a note in the mail. Oh my goodness, a note in the mail.
Yeah.
I just aged myself there. But that is definitely a lost art, because we have become such an instantaneous society. And I'm guilty of this. I will admit it, that I'm like, it takes too long to get something there. They could be over whatever it is that they're dealing with if I actually mail them something. So I'll just send them an email, or I'll just, send them a text, or I'll, if I know somebody's in the hospital. Well, you never know how long anybody's in the hospital anymore because of insurance and whatever else is going on. So it's like, no, just call them. But there's a difference to receiving something in the mail versus a text or an email. Good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know, but I know that there's a difference. It takes more effort to send something in the mail. So maybe it's that there was more thought into it. Maybe that's what the difference is that I'm thinking of. It took more energy to get the stamp, write the note, write the card, buy the card, whatever is the situation, get it to the mail. Like for me personally, it's a huge effort because I don't have mail at my house. I have to go to the post office because we have a post office box in our town.
Mm-hmm.
And then while I can access my post office box and get my own mail, if I want to mail something in order to get stamps, our post office, the inner office, is only open like 3 hours in the morning, and then they take lunch and they go work at a different post office for a few hours, and then like 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. So it is a lot of effort
Mm-hmm.
for me to get everything that I need in order to mail something to somebody. So I don't know, maybe that's why I think that has more value to it.
Right.
And Alex says, realize that everyone is dealing with the same chaos that this pandemic has caused. And again, that goes back to the grace that, we all
That's
need to have for one another, because we are different people than we were back in March. Some people for the better, some people just different, and some people not for the better. But it's, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, that's why the communication is so important.
Yeah, and I think I think it's been on social media where they talk about that ship. Everyone's in the same storm, but on different ships or something. You know the thing about which I'm speaking. I can't remember it exactly.
No.
Okay, so because
to
I'll have to find it and I will share it the following time because I don't want to mess it up. Well, no, because I think it's the way it's worded is important, so I don't want to communicate it
incorrectly. Yeah, no, I get that, and that's good.
So, but I was just okay. I was just trying to think, and it like totally ran away. But so that's okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just thinking on communication. I'm trying to like tie it all back up in like a little neat package with a bow.
Mm-hmm. It's more than words. It's everything we do, really.
It's everything we do. It's how we look. It's how we act.
Like you said, even if you're not saying words, you're communicating something. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not reaching out to people via anything, you're communicating something.
So it's important to have the grace and patience, I think, when we're communicating, is truly listen to what the other says. I know that it was. I was just thinking, as we even communicate with our loved ones, our children, those around us, how important it is that we give them the respect to, even if it means setting the phone down. A phone call comes in, a text comes in.
Alex joins us every week, if not almost every week. And she always talks about balance. It always seems to come back somehow that she can bring in the word balance. And she just did that now. She said, dare I say, a balancing act? And I actually had thought of that earlier, and I'm like, are we going to get the word balance in here today?
So, and it's true. I think that there it is, tied up in a bow. It's a balance. And I just encourage everyone to communicate and to be patient with each other during this time, and to realize how important communication is. And when someone stops communicating, that you might want to reach out to those people or just think on those people. And if it goes for a long period, check in on them.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that they're weak, but it means that they have a need.
Right. Yeah. And it could just be that they have a need to not be communicating with anybody for a while because they've just become overwhelmed with everything. But letting them know that you are there for them when they're ready to communicate is appreciated, I think, and needed. Probably needed in some situations, even when the person trying not to communicate doesn't think it's needed.
And in reaching out, you are communicating
Yes.
that you are there.
Yep. So I think we've covered our 3 points. Touch on them again. Let me double check.
Communicating with the education staff.
Yep. So we said find the ways that work best for you and your loved ones' support staff and go with that.
Ways we all use to communicate.
Yep. So we talked about body language, facial expressions, voice, tone, words. Okay.
Important communication, how important communication is in all situations.
And we just kind of wrap that up with you're always communicating something, and you want to make sure that you're providing grace and that you're communicating what you want to communicate and that you are listening and hearing, and hopefully understanding, if it's a loved one especially, that you are communicating to them not necessarily in your preferred way or the way that you understand best, but their preferred way or the way that they receive it best. So that kind of goes along with the 5 love languages. If anybody is familiar with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what that was about, but
it's such a
apparently
mess.
there's a story there, guys. We'll have to bring that out of her sometime.
It's messy. It's messy.
It is, especially when you're trying to communicate love. If you're not communicating it in a way that the other person receives it, then they're not receiving that love that you're trying to give to them. It's kind of basically what the 5 love languages breaks down to. All right. Well, we are at almost an hour. And I told Fran, communication, that'll take us like 2 minutes to talk about.
You did?
But again, what my intention of what my thought of what she was communicating to me was not what she was communicating to me. So we talked about it and we communicated and we figured it out.
In multiple formats.
Yes. And so thank you all who joined us today. Thank you, Alex, for your comments, and for Rachel, who also commented today. Next week, Tuesday, on #NoLimits is the rescheduled #NoLimits with Shay Spears. She is someone who has grown up with a learning disability, and she is a special education teacher. She's an entrepreneur. She's had 2 or 3 different businesses. So tune in for that Tuesday at 1:00. Next week, Friday with Fran, we haven't communicated with each other yet what we're talking about. So hopefully I'll have something out ahead of time for that. And if you like this, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're following us on Facebook, make sure you give it a like button. Yeah, it's somewhere down there. I never know, or somewhere up there, or over there, who knows? I don't know. It's around somewhere. So again, this was Fridays with Fran. I'm Shelley Kino, with Shelley Kino IEP Consultant, and I'm sorry, I can't even say my own business name right today. Shelley Kino Education Consultant and Master IEP Coach. It's time for me to stop talking. So y'all have a great day and continue to make the world better for all, one person and one IEP at a time.